Bringing a fresh new perspective on the challenges and issues that face our criminal justice system and their impact on all New Yorkers. This is Justice Matters with your host, President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Good afternoon to all our listeners here on AM 970 The Answer. My name is Patrick Cullen, and I am the president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, representing the best court officers in the nation. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to Justice Matters, which is a show that highlights the very important issues our court officers face and the role we play in maintaining safety and security in the state Supreme Courts in New York City and the Ninth Judicial District. Before we get to today's guests, I'd like to touch on a few issues and developments, as I usually do, since our last episode. Last week, the City Council voted to close Rikers Island. The decision has followed many debates, studies, and hearings. Ultimately, with this vote, the existing facilities will be shuttered and replaced by 4 community jails to be located in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx. Despite massive opposition from tax-paying residents, in the neighborhoods where these jails will be built, the elected officials making this decision have voted to make this city less safe. Paired with the backward bail reform initiatives to begin on January 1st, 2020, we will begin to see bad actors released to commit more crimes in a turnstile of a system which creates more victims. These actions, which lack common sense and work counterproductively to the hardworking tax-paying public, and eventually will drive even more people out of New York, they've ignored the pleas of the law enforcement community. That seems to be nothing new, as uniformed personnel in New York continue to be disrespected at a never-before-seen level. What's behind all of this? Well, multiple factors contributed here. Number one, the extreme activist agenda, driving a culture of accused first, victim second, law enforcement third, continues to take center stage here in New York City. And that agenda, which God forbid you oppose, which you'll be labeled as any number of things, the least of which is sensical. Second, why not take Rikers Island, which is currently at only 60% capacity, and refurbish it to update it to the specifications of the prisoners' advocacy groups, which have driven this decision from the start? Seems to me like perhaps current elected officials would rather develop that land for LaGuardia airport expansion and or real estate development interests that many of them are beholden to, and all of whom will not be in office by the supposed but far-fetched completion date of 2026. Here's who loses, folks. Hard-working, tax-paying residents of New York saddled with a minimum of $8 billion of tax burden to have a huge potential to make their communities less safe. That, to me, is just so destructive. And we have a perfect guest joining us today to discuss this and so many other issues surrounding criminal justice today. Joining me is Tina Moore, Police Bureau Chief, columnist for the New York Post. Tina, welcome to Justice Matters.
Hi, thank you.
Please, before we get into some questions, many of our members obviously read your bylines in the newspaper every week. Just want to know a little bit about your background. How'd you get into journalism, and how your path led you to covering the biggest public safety and criminal justice issues in New York City every day?
Sure. Well, I'm a Philly girl. I was born and raised there. And I went to Temple University. When I graduated, I found that I was still working in restaurants, couldn't find a job in journalism. So I moved to D.C. to take a PR job, a public relations job. And I was on the Hill, and I found myself basically acting as a hostess to congressmen, like walking them into rooms, and it was the same thing. It just was ridiculous. So I found the first job I could find at a paper, and it was at a weekly where Bob Woodward had worked right outside D.C. So that's where I started. And then I just worked my way back through papers till I got back to Philly and went to the Philadelphia Inquirer and wrote for them for 5 years. And then I got an opportunity here, and I came up to work for the Daily News, and now I work for the Post.
Right.
So
that's great. Those are great stories always to hear people trudge their way through their careers, and to wind up in a place like New York is really got to be kind of considered the pinnacle of your profession, I would think.
It's
One
awesome.
of them, at least.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. I love it.
And as a matter of background, like looking back over your career now here, throughout your career, but here in New York especially, what are 2 or 3 of the stories that you've covered that stand out to this day? Things that we're still referencing, even though they may have happened a number of years ago.
I remember I wrote a story about the homeless department here in the city, program under Mayor Bloomberg. They were experimenting on the homeless by refusing a couple hundred family services to see what would happen. And I wrote the story. I remember in the interview, one of the DHS people said, "It's only 200 families." And I was like, oh my God, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So that was a story. And then I read a lot of lead paint stories about kids being put into different housing situations where there was lead paint and they were getting sick and they were testing positive. Now this is still going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope to think that I made some kind of a difference at some point. I also read a lot of stories about teenagers who were getting stopped dozens of times by police officers and not charged with anything, which was obviously was a big deal and did lead to some change. I hope.
I think that absolutely, and I think obviously I think the media is such an enormous part of New York City and the newspapers. Even though we're in a different era of newspaper media, still drive the conversation and action in the city. And it's really, I was brought up reading the newspaper since I was a young kid. My dad would give me the newspaper, and I read it through high school when most kids didn't. Now everybody's looking at their phone. They're probably not reading news stories, but I still revere the newspaper and newspaper writers from the old generation and new generation. And so I look at it as really a conversation driver. And like you said, the impetus to get things done, I think, starts on black and white. But I also, as a union leader, I see the media as a partner. Because it's hard to get a lot of our messages, especially in the law enforcement community. It's hard to get our side of the story and a message out to the public. And I have really relied a lot of times on reporters to at least investigate. Maybe we only have half the story, but at least look into it and see if there's something more, and that may, again, spur action. As we look around every corner of our city, it seems like law enforcement is increasingly under attack. And first, would you agree with that assessment?
I don't know. It's so hard to quantify that. There hasn't been any large-scale study that I've seen. I know from talking to retired police officers that back in the 80s and 90s, they would ride through neighborhoods and they'd get airmail where people would be throwing large appliances onto their cars or them. Yeah. So I don't know, but you can see why they were doing that. They were driving through the neighborhoods, in some cases on buses, banging their nightsticks on the floor. So, it's difficult.
It is difficult, and I think that they're and I hate to use the cliche, but I will. Until you walk a mile in somebody's shoes, you don't 100% know what they go through. So while a certain take on law enforcement may be existing, in other places it may not. And so it may be a very blurred line where there has been more of an attention paid to how communities react to policing, and there may not. And so I think, again, it's case by case, but I think also it's a question that every single officer should be asked, right?
Yeah, and, video's changed everything.
Oh, 100%.
Obviously, that's so much more attention now. If I get a video of something, it's just the readership, the online readership goes way up.
Yes.
So that's,
I just recently on the broadcast news, every story seems to have a surveillance video of somebody they're looking for, and I think that's what has changed crime statistics, to be honest with you. That crime continually is touted to be down by the commissioner and the mayor. But at the same time, is it that crime is down, or is it that they're closing cases quicker because we have video evidence, or we know exactly who we're looking for, instead of the old school knocking on doors and canvassing neighborhoods? We know who we're looking for by the camera that's on the corner store. I don't know. It could be helping the closing of cases, instead of robberies and homicides and things like that being open for a lot longer period of time.
People might be aware they're more likely to get caught now too.
Maybe.
As a preventer.
Maybe, yeah, absolutely. A deterrent, and I think deterrents have helped law enforcement since the days when they used to hang the nightstick on the corner of the light pole to let them know that the officer was around and not to fool around. Perhaps. I don't know, but the body cameras are definitely a game changer for sure. What do you believe has contributed to the maybe anti-law enforcement culture that we do see, that we may find ourselves in? Do you have any insight?
Well, I'll go back to the stop and frisk that I was talking about
Right.
before. It has gone down, really way down, but the memory doesn't go away, and I think it's that memories in the community still, among other things, Eric Garner, cases like that, large cases that were on video
Right.
that everyone's seen so many times, and I think that's led to that feeling as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is that a case may stick in somebody's mind, but individually, somebody's either being helped by the police or by law enforcement in general may change their mind to be positive, have a positive experience,
Right.
whereas somebody also may have a negative experience, and that sticks with them for a long period of time. So I guess it again comes down to a case by case basis,
Well, that's
right?
the point of community policing that
Yeah.
we're trying to do now, which is to have a friendlier view of police officers.
Right.
And it seems maybe it'll work.
Yeah, I think it works to a point, and I think that there is just a point where it will never work. And I think maybe the divergence of the possibility that it may never work in certain cases, then there has to be an epilogue after that. There has to be a point where they go, okay, well, the community policing works to this point, but now what do we do when it doesn't?
Right.
In certain places, certain crimes, certain areas, certain whatever patterns, whatever it might be. But that's very interesting. And so technology really takes kind of place as technology is changing everything, right? We're going to lose 35 million jobs by 2030 to automation. We're not going to lose police officers, but technology is changing. Unfortunately, and like I said, I view reporters as partners in messaging for labor unions. We've been kind of in the same side of things for so long. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit about some of the initiatives and reforms that are coming and how you see them as a member of the media and as somebody who covers the police. So if you stick with me, Justice Matters. We'll be right back after this message.
Bringing a fresh new perspective on the challenges and issues that face our criminal justice system and their impact on all New Yorkers, this is Justice Matters with your host, President of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association, Patrick Cullen.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. We're here continuing our conversation with Tina Moore from the New York Post. Thanks again for joining me, Tina. Thank you. Two major issues that we're really facing down here, and a potential third, which I'll get into, bail reform, and the shuttering of Rikers Island, the plan to shutter Rikers Island. I think these are going to have monumental impacts on the future of the city, not just in criminal justice, but in how we are we going to retain residents here? Is it going to be more dangerous and see people leave New York? I mean, this is up for debate. Obviously, time will tell, but we need to be prepared for this bail reform. So, as you know, it's really radically going to change our entire criminal justice system beginning on the first of the year. And it's going to affect everything from our courts, public safety, the corrections issue. What are your thoughts on what lies ahead?
Well, I mean, the police department officials have expressed their concern about it. They're worried about it. They know it could be a problem. I think they also understand, or I think most people understand, that Rikers was a pretty horrible place and terrible things happened there.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the desire to change things. I think I've heard the commissioner possibly say that he worried that there wouldn't be enough space, and what are they going to do when a lot of people are going to get put back out on the street again?
Right.
So that's yeah. I mean, I can see reason to be scared.
Yeah, I think that they're interconnected, bail reform and the shuttering of Rikers. Bail reform, obviously an initiative that was really something that was being, I want to say, chased in Albany for a long time, and the opportunity arose to pass it with one-party rule in Albany, which the Democrats took control of the Senate for the first time in 30-some-odd years, and they passed a lot of things, and I know that there was a lot of debate about it. This wasn't overnight, and under the cover of night done. Mm-hmm. There was debate, and there was concern from every police group and a lot of victims advocacy groups and things like that. So the concern exists. The idea of somebody basically being arrested and going to a precinct and within maybe 30 minutes being back on the street, it really boils down to, I believe, a psychological. Like, if somebody is determined to commit crimes and go on a crime spree, let's say, or, continue to commit burglaries, for example, there's nothing to, like we said before, deter them. They go in, they'll get some paperwork to return to court. If they return to court, is now up to them. The warrant squad's going to be very busy because I think a lot of people are not going to come to court to begin with. But I don't know. What do you think? You think that are we placing the responsibility on those accused of a crime to return to court, answer the charges, and then somehow not be bad actors in our community? I don't know.
We write these stories a lot at the tabloids. They're junk justice stories where a person goes and sees a judge. The prosecutor might say $5,000 bail, and the judge says, here, $500, and they get out and then they commit more crimes.
Yeah.
So it does happen. I'm sure it'll happen even more. I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the New York Post will be right on top of that,
right,
because I do believe in, especially the Post's accountability, making institutions accountable for these types of decisions. So, I guess it's a wait and see, right? I mean, but if you have, you're in a community and you're, elderly mom and dad going to the store, and now there's just more people out there who, this is a tough city.
I feel horrible for victims of these crimes, but
that's the thing. Are they taking a back seat? Are victims taking a back seat?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I hope not. I hope that they can work this out and everything will be fine. We'll be covering it either way.
No, and that we appreciate that. And again, it goes to the idea of without people like yourself, veteran reporters on crime and policing, where are we? Are we left to the devices of people's tweets and things like that to determine what's happening in our communities? Because you guys are holding everybody accountable at this point, and so we need newspaper reporters now more than ever when it comes to this type of thing.
Hey, I think so.
Yeah.
A little biased.
Yeah, that's all right though. When it comes to closing Rikers, I understand. Look, there is no doubt that there have been inhumane activities. The way the place is set up, it was never set up for the way it's gone on. I know that there's been issues about solitary confinement. The Khalif Browder, I think, issue really shone a spotlight on how far things really could get and how bad they could get. But at the same time, are we rushing? Has this city rushed to make a decision that placates a certain segment of our community without paying much more attention to the community that's more concerned about these new jails that are going to be built?
I think I'm not really sure on that one. I'm curious to see what does happen with the land once Rikers isn't there any longer. But the new jails, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that the land. I mean, look, there's only a certain amount of land on this island, and to be honest with you, there's only a certain amount of space in the air left to build after Hudson Yards now. I mean, all these projects, more and more, every morning you see basically a new building going up. What is the land going to be used for? At the end of the day, nobody who voted on this and nobody who held hearings and the mayor himself will be involved in city government and decision making in 2026 due to term limits. So are they saddling a future generation of public representatives with massive problems, and not to mention the $8 billion tax bill that goes along with it? At least, we can always count on a few billion more going into a project like this. I don't know. What's your take on the person who lives in those neighborhoods?
Well, the Post, we had a front page story on Monday by a coworker of mine about how none of the politicians who voted on it will live anywhere near the jails that are going to be built. Yeah. So there's no accountability there either.
Yeah, sure. And I believe the four city council members who who represent the districts where these jails are proposed to be built all live at least a mile or a mile and a half away from those sites. It just really, my concern for my members is the affordability of this city. And so with an $8 billion tax bill, to build these institutions, which whether they may or may not be needed, is going to saddle, civil servants who by no stretch of the imagination are wealthy to have to find a new place to live, because it's just going to become less affordable. We're chasing out the people who serve the city. We're chasing them out. Number two, obviously, the safety factor in and around these facilities, it's up for question. We don't know. But we do know whether Rikers could have been refurbished and be kept, kind of off the mainland a little bit to provide more of a public safety and more of a controlled environment for the Department of Corrections and the city. Are we chasing ghosts here and crossing our fingers that it works, or there's no guarantee, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. What are some things you're looking at just in the future other than these types of initiatives? I know we're looking at, and I'd love to speak to you to talk about maybe future story on the idea of consolidating our court system. Have you heard much about that?
Not really.
Yeah,
no.
they're looking to consolidate all the courts under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
There would be some public hearings on that, which
It does make sense.
we want to hear. Yeah, look, as taxpayers, we want our public institutions to be more effective, cost-effective, and efficient, right?
A lot of these cases, the junk justice cases I was talking about, the person's committing crimes in multiple jurisdictions, and nobody really puts it all together until we write about it in the paper.
Yeah.
So
So that's, again, seeing the media and labor as true partners, that's something maybe we can work on together in the future.
Sure.
Because it's coming down the pike, and now, with raise the age, the bail reform, the Rikers issue, and a possible consolidation of the court system, within 8 to 10 years, we're looking at a completely revamped criminal justice system in the largest city on planet Earth and the most complex criminal justice system. So we need people like you, Tina, and we appreciate your stories. They always lend themselves to a real fair account, and we can't appreciate that more because we're losing that, I think, in certain segments of the media. And so I appreciate your fairness and for coming on today and discussing some of these issues. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been great.
Come back anytime.
Cool.
Justice Matters will be back right after this.
Welcome back to Justice Matters with your host, Patrick Cullen, president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
Welcome back, everybody, to Justice Matters. In the second half of this week's show, we're going to hear from the county executive of Dutchess County, Mark Molinaro, who's up for re-election next month. Mr. Molinaro, welcome to Justice Matters.
I'm happy to be on, and please, it's Mark. Always Mark.
Okay, Mark. Please introduce yourself to our listeners a little bit, those who don't know about you, a little bit of background, how you got into the office you now hold.
Sure. Well, I'm in my 8th year as Dutchess County executive. We're about 2 hours north of New York City and an hour south of Albany, right along the Great Hudson River. But I spent 6 years in the New York State Assembly, got to know a few of your members when I served there. And 12 years I was mayor of my hometown, the village of Tivoli. In fact, in 1995, I was elected mayor at the age of 19.
Yes.
So in many ways, I've spent every day of my adult life in public service. But again, 8 years as Dutchess County executive. I oversee a $550 million budget, 1,700 county employees, and things are going strong here in Dutchess.
Yes, that's true. And to be honest with you, just so that our listeners, and again, this is a show for our members and about our members and how some of our allies in public service and those who serve our communities affect, our workplaces. A lot of people think that we just represent people in New York City, when in fact we represent all the court officers in the 9th Judicial District, which of course Dutchess County is included in. It's the northernmost part. And to be completely fair, your county executive building stands right between the two courthouses where we represent officers up there.
It is. I see your members all the time. Interestingly, the Dutchess County office building is right on Market Street.
Yes.
And in fact, one of the court buildings your officers work in, the county court here on Market Street in Poughkeepsie, was actually the place where they ratified the United States Constitution in the state of New York. And so you're in a historic structure. I know that some of your listeners would know this, but Alexander Hamilton actually debated the Bill of Rights here in Poughkeepsie in that courthouse. And so it's a real honor to serve here, and it's an honor to be among you. Now I do know that we also share a parking lot. So
yes.
That's important.
I'm very well aware of it, and to be honest with you, I know that there's been a lot of work between my representatives up there and your office about parking spaces and things like that. So we're appreciative of just the ability to sit down with you and your staff members to discuss some of the issues. They might not seem like big deals to some people, but they are to the working men and women up there in Dutchess County. And so we appreciate that, Mark.
No, we're happy to. And like I said, I mean, we feel safe here too. We see your guys and your members every day, all day, and we have a good relationship. So thanks for that.
That's terrific. So the election day, November 5th. Couple of weeks away here. What's your message been to the residents of Dutchess County this election cycle, and what are your plans for the future if you're reelected?
Yeah, well, I came into office 8 years ago during the Great Recession, and we turned at that time I inherited a $40 million budget gap. So we turned a fairly difficult financial situation. 8 years later, Dutchess County has the strongest and the highest bond rating of any county in the state of New York. We've seen now 24 consecutive months of private sector job growth, $5 billion worth of economic development underway right now in Dutchess, which has just been tremendous. Lowest unemployment rate in 17 years. And in fact, we've been able to provide 5 years of property tax cuts, and just announced in a week I'll release a budget that will provide the largest property tax cut in 20 years.
Wow,
so things are going strong in Dutchess.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a mouthful, as they say. And you know what? That's terrific. It's terrific to hear because a lot of counties aren't doing so well, or some places are struggling. So to hear that type of growth, that kind of commitment to economic growth, and obviously that spurs everything. So
it does. Growing tax base means people are ultimately going to have to pay less as long as we control spending. And Dutchess County has been able to hold the 1.4% annual growth in spending and still expand services. So it's let me tell you, it's a balancing act. But we've got a great team of folks who work here. We've got a great community that invests a lot, and folks really want to give back. So we've been able to provide a strong fiscal condition, good economic growth, and a lot of investment in the services people demand and expect from county government.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And to be honest with you, now that I even think about it, so many of our members who actually work within, either other counties within the 9th Judicial District or even in the borders of the New York City will travel to Dutchess County because, it's more affordable. We've been talking a lot during this run of our shows recently about affordability in not just New York City, but Westchester County. Now we're talking to you about Dutchess County. You're laying out a red carpet for people to say, you know what? I can deal with the extra time driving to work because I can raise my family there in an affordable manner. That's so important. And so, you're rolling out the red carpet for people like me, people like my members, people who are, committed to serving their communities for their career. We're never going to be millionaires, but we're going to be able to raise our families in an area, in a community that we can be confident in.
Well, we want you here, honestly, and this is a great place to raise a family. And even, by the way, if you're just listening, you want to come visit, Dutchess is one of those places that it's a great tourist destination and an easy drive, especially this time of year. You can come do what most people do and look at leaves.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, apple peck. I'm partial to the Culinary Institute, but
okay, fair enough. One of the best. I mean, it really is the epicenter of the food and beverage industry. Yeah, it's amazing.
You received a number of law enforcement endorsements for your campaign,
including yours.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Other than us, who else is on board, and why are they supporting you?
Well, listen, I as I said, I mean, I have 25 years in public service. I have the greatest respect for those men and women in law enforcement, and really have created and built a good relationship where we've made real strides in partnership, training, resources, assets, new tools to law enforcement. So I'm proud to have your endorsement. Grateful for that. The New York State Troopers PBA, the Dutchess County Sheriff's PBA, the City of Poughkeepsie PBA, and many others. But I think at the end of the day, we show respect to law enforcement. We protect law enforcement. We work with the men and women who sacrifice every day and provide support to their families as well. And I think that's built a relationship that's led to their support of the work that I do.
Yeah, whatever people may think about law enforcement these days, and there are varied opinions, as you well know, and they're not. It's different than it used to be. But at the same time, when you have these numbers of groups representing police, fire, corrections, courts, coming out and saying, yeah, even after 8 years, we still want Mark to be our county executive. Doesn't that say something about, first of all, obviously it says everything about the job you've done, but doesn't it say something about, hey, these are places we can count on to be safe, These are places that we know, the towns, villages, and cities within Dutchess County are safe places, and the stamp of approval by a group of law enforcement professionals says everything about that. And again, it goes to, building economic development and bringing, residents to your county, correct?
It does, but it's a relationship, right? I think we respect law enforcement, and they appreciate the support that they get. Now, listen, the data proves it. We've seen significant reduction in crime in Dutchess County over the last 8 years, a 50% reduction in crime activity in the city of Poughkeepsie over the last 8 years. But that comes with the relationship. We provide crisis intervention training, law enforcement, mental health, first aid, great deal of communication integration and shared technology. Our drug task force is paid for at the county level. So we invest in making sure that no matter where you live or visit in Dutchess, we're supporting local law enforcement, and that's produced real outcomes. And the public, I think, feels safe living in Dutchess and visiting Dutchess. So, I'm grateful for the support, but I think ultimately it is born out of a respectful partnership that we have with local law enforcement. And I think it's important. You can have whatever view you wish of law enforcement, but at the end of the day, these men and women go off to provide for our safety with always the fear that they may not return home.
Yeah.
At the very least, everyone should respect that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's not what we're seeing in New York City as much. And obviously, things are different in Dutchess County than in New York City. Everybody's going to agree to that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that somebody who puts a uniform on every day is different in north of the city than within the 5 boroughs. And so that disconnect is lost somewhere between, Market Street and Center Street. You know what I mean? So, I think it's all of our responsibility to try and somehow bridge that gap a little bit. But when you have responsible people in charge for long periods of time who understand the complexities of law enforcement, like yourself, and that helps the citizenry understand, hey, you know what, like you just said, these are your next door neighbor who goes to work, puts on a uniform, to provide for his family. Not a bad guy. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. And so I think somehow we have to, somehow bridge that gap. Would you agree?
I do. And listen, no group of people wants to be judged based on one person's mistake. No group of people. But again, we work in a world and with jobs where 99% of the time no one is trying to hurt me. But every day, men and women go out to work in uniform, and their lives are at risk, and they have families. And I think if you remember that, if they have wives and husbands and children and parents who are worried for them, care about them, and need them to provide for them, if you think of that first, at the very least, you got to build in yourself a level of respect, and just always remember that. And I think that's somewhat. I think that is the divide. I think people just think in many ways law enforcement is like just this group of people. Now these are individuals. These are human beings who have lives and families that rely on them, that count on them, that worry for them. Respect that. Yep. And I think we're a better place. And
that we're also the people who drive the economy a lot. The guy you see in Starbucks on a Sunday morning is, you don't know what he does for a living, but at the same time he lives next door, or you see him at the supermarket or whatever. That again, you're right. You can't paint with a broad brush what people do for a living based on what maybe some people have negatively done in the past. So I appreciate that take on the issue from you. We're going to take a quick break. If you'll stick with me for a couple of minutes, sure. I want to come back and talk more about the economy and the budget that you referenced. And that's really all very important stuff, and tax outlook and things like that. So just hang in there, Mark. Justice Matters. We'll be right back after this.
This is Justice Matters with Patrick Cullen, president of the New York State Supreme Court Officers Association.
Welcome back to Justice Matters. We're continuing our conversation with Dutchess County Executive Mark Molinaro, who is running for re-election. Election day, a couple weeks away, November 5th. One of the things I wanted to talk about, Mark, was the economy. I know we touched on it a little bit before, but I want to get into maybe some more specifics. How have you and your staff in Dutchess worked to really spur economic growth in Dutchess County? Because, there are parts of this state where you drive around and, you see maybe an entire strip mall that's completely void of any business. You know, I mean, it looks like tumbleweeds have come through there. Another discussion I recently had was about, what are we doing to get young people working? When like I say, the strip mall where you had businesses where a teenage kid, a junior in high school, could go and work, and now that no longer exists. Where are we teaching that work ethic from, too? So can you tie in some of that stuff?
Can. I mean, absolutely. Well, first, I mean, if you travel the state, there are in some places whole communities that are hollowed out because of the loss of industry. New York, sadly, is still has about the worst business climate of any state in America. Highest tax burden of any state in America, and we lead the nation in out-migration, meaning more people leave New York to other states than any other state in America except Alaska. And Alaska's probably because it has something to do with the weather. Yeah. But it's the tax and regulation climate that really has pushed people out. It's just very expensive to live in New York, and there are other parts of the country that have greater job opportunities at a lower cost of living. So we swim in that pond, right? And we're not, sadly, even in Dutchess, we're still living in a very expensive state. Yes. But we've tried to streamline approval processes. We try to coordinate with local municipalities, and we've lowered taxes. And so those things combined have created an environment where jobs are growing. The other is, I say, the old joke in Dutchess County is when New York City does well, Dutchess County does well, and when New York City does badly, Dutchess County does well. I mean, there's always this outward push from the city. It's just a different population depending on what's going on in the city. And I will say, if crime is growing in the city and the economy isn't strong in the city, there are middle and upper class businesses and individuals who push out into the suburbs. We benefit from that. Yeah. So Dutchess was once an IBM community, and that was 20, 30 years ago. We reorganized our economic development efforts to focus on smaller and medium-sized manufacturers, a lot of high-tech jobs, still associated with IBM, Global Foundries, and others like Verizon, who are really making technology work here, close enough to New York City that they can have that connection, but far enough away that they're able to have a much lower cost of doing business. We have a very innovative healthcare industry that relies on our local colleges, Marist College, Vassar College, Bard College, Dutchess Community, and the Culinary Institute, all great learning institutions that thousands of students are here. So we've been able to create a pipeline from college kid to employment, which is useful and important. And we've really promoted Dutchess as an innovative community, and we've been able to attract small and medium-sized manufacturers from as close as Brooklyn and New York City and as far away as the West Coast and Israel here. So we're seeing that growth, I think in part because of our proximity to the city, but also, as you mentioned, right, the lower cost of living. Now, that has produced now 24 consecutive months of private sector job growth. We've actually seen about 4,000 new jobs created over the course of the last 14 months, which is pretty impressive. And our average weekly income among residents has actually grown 8% over 8 years. So we can continue to see that, which is, it lifts all boats, so to speak. Things are improving.
That's terrific. I mean, I know the Hudson Valley and Dutchess County, tremendous educational, a cradle of a lot of great educational institutions. Right. And the idea of, and I applaud that, right? From going from student to resident to, productive member of the employment community. That's a terrific philosophy to have because those schools are so diverse. But you have, and even like you said, CIA. I mean, some of the best restaurants in New York are right there in Dutchess County in the Hudson Valley. It's tremendous. So I applaud that. That's a great, really great initiative. Something I never thought of. But again, I'm concerned too about the future of how employment looks as a labor leader. How does employment look, going down the line here? We're talking about maybe losing 35 million jobs by 2030 to automation. So, we really have to be out front. And I think very few people are talking about that. Any outlook on that?
Well, I mean, part of it is making a connection between, educational outcomes need to support the economic needs. So, we have to teach kids for the jobs we need and the jobs that we're going to grow. I mean, that's important. So, yeah, correct. And the state is challenged with that. So even public education, K-12, has to produce kids that are going to be able to go to work. And that means, by the way, diversifying education. And for us, that means relying on the trades and apprenticeship and really, giving giving young people an outlet, a path to a job, no matter what they want to do.
Right.
Not every kid wants to go to college, and we need more people who can go into a trade. So we're actually working with a local manufacturing organization and the local trades to build a trade school, in essence, an apprenticeship program where we can train folks for manufacturer-related jobs. Even though you are correct, automation is going to continue to push jobs out, there are still people who need to make sure that automation works.
Yes.
So it really means retraining those who are in the workforce and creating educational opportunities that push kids, young people, into the jobs that we're going to have and going to need. And the other is, again, diversifying the economy. We used to be a sort of a single employer community, and you can look all across the country, and there are towns, cities, counties that are reliant on one employer: Amazon, Apple, whatever it is.
Right.
So if the industry changes and there's a swing in that particular employer, then your entire economy is in trouble.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about diversification. It's making sure that we have healthcare. We have, by the way, aviation mechanics. We're building an aviation hangar here at our airport to train young people to enter into that world. It means making sure that you have public sector, private sector job opportunities. So it really is about diversification and ensuring the educational outcomes and the training support is there for those that are looking for jobs or trying to reenter the workforce. But it's a challenge. It's a big challenge in a time where the technology is just changing so rapidly.
Yeah, I don't think the responsibility solely rests on government shoulders when it comes to this either, though. I think there's a responsibility from, number one, public institutions, and number two, private employers to get out, and people like myself included, labor union leaders and civil service professionals to get out and let people know. I think what's really happened over the last 20, 30 years is kids think they're going to, literally walk across a stage at a college graduation and become a millionaire, and that is just not the way it works, unfortunately.
Well, it's because they see it, obviously social media and the media sort of highlight this, but we need mechanics. We need electricians, and that's not going to be automated anytime soon. We need folks to provide for our public safety. We're not going to have robots just yet patrolling our streets.
No.
So. But that is, to me, that's why diversification is important. I know it sounds sort of governmentally and boring. It's not like, we just welcome 2,500 jobs. You need a little bit of everything because that's how the economy remains active and vibrant and gives people employment options. Absent that, you have whole communities that could empty out because a business went from, traditional manufacturing to entirely automated.
Yeah. Obviously, again, we have endorsed you, and you can count on our support going forward. You got a couple of weeks here left. How can folks follow your campaign, learn a little bit more about Mark Molinaro, County Executive, and your reelection?
Well, the easiest is to visit us at markmolinaro.com or molinaroforduchess.com, and if you're interested in volunteering or helping out, you can sign up there. You could also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I know you're a big Instagrammer.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, huge. Huge.
But you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. At Mark Molinaro, I think, is for all three. But I also want to remind folks, New York State rolled out this year early voting, so this is the first time. In fact, you'll be able to vote for a whole week if you wish. The old joke is vote early and often.
Yeah.
In New York, you can vote early, but not often.
Not often, right?
But voting starts, in fact, on Saturday, the 26th of October, and for a solid 8 days, voters in Dutchess County have 5 separate locations that you can visit to vote. You don't have to live near that location to vote there, and you can cast your ballot ahead of the November 5th election day. And if you just prefer, polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on November 5th, Tuesday, November 5th. And I tell people, and by the way, I know you can appreciate it, we all pay attention to national politics. We all obviously are concerned about presidential elections, but the rubber hits the road in your local elections. This is the decisions we make have a direct impact on people every day, and how and who you choose to represent you can have a profound impact on your life.
And that's exactly why I'm so happy to have you on today, because again, everything is about your locality. You shouldn't worry about the big macro stuff until you worry about how to take care of your own home. And you've done a tremendous job up there. We wish you the best of luck. You have our support. And if there's anything else we could do, please let us know.
I appreciate that. Thanks
Mark,
for
thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it.
You bet. Best to your members.
Thank you. Well, that'll wrap up another episode of Justice Matters this week. If you have any insight, like I always say, positive or negative, you can reach me at Cullen, CULLEN, at nysscoa.org. We'll be back next week with another episode of Justice Matters. Let us know what you think of the show, and check out everything surrounding our union at www.nysscoa.org. Until next week, have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.